In this video, we're going to show you how to put a new top end in a 125 two-stroke. First things first, prepare the engine to take off the top end. Now I'm doing this really primitive with a brick to prop up the motor. I didn't have an engine stand on me at the time, and most people are gonna do this with the engine inside the bike, which I usually prefer, but since we're doing the rebuild, we already had the motor out, and it made it a little bit easier to film. Clean up any dirt, debris, anything that's gonna get in the way while we're popping off the cylinder, and then we can moto our way on through this rebuild. Remove cylinder head. So the first thing you're gonna do is pop off the spark plug. You can do this after you have the head off, but it is way more of a hassle. And go ahead and loosen the cylinder head bolts. I did that in a crisscross pattern, which is more important to do when you're tightening. I just did it when I'm loosening as well. Make sure to take off the washers. Organize everything. You're gonna be putting on new washers, but it's still nice to have the old parts nice and organized so you can find everything efficiently. Then pop off the head. Disconnect the power valve. Pretty simple step. You're just going to go ahead and take these 8mm bolts out, pop this cover off. You'll expose a 10mm bolt, which you'll take off. There is a washer. Watch out so you don't lose that. And just get your fingers in there, kind of jiggle it loose. It'll pull out a little bit. And then there's also this collar. Take that off. Make sure you don't lose it. Remove the cylinder. There's 4 cylinder bolts. One is in this power valve chamber, a little bit hard to access. Make sure that you have a wrench. And then I also use a hammer just to break loose and get that initial turn. And again, just like the cylinder head, I always like to loosen bolts opposite each other. It's just a habit, but it's a good one to get into. And completely remove the bolts. There are no washers on these. And then just a little back and forth, and you should be able to wiggle it up and pull it clean off. Remove the piston. Before you do anything, stick some clean paper towels down into your bottom end above the crankshaft. Trust me, you do not want to learn this the hard way when you drop one of these circlips. There's a little open spot in the piston, and just use a needle nose and take out only one side of the circlip, what you need, and then your finger should be just enough to push that wrist pin all the way through, and then remove the piston. And always take time to just notice, is there anything abnormally worn about the piston? It'll give you a little idea of if anything's been going on with your motor. And then use a razor blade just to assist you in taking the cylinder gasket off. Try to get as under the gasket as you possibly can so you're not kind of splitting it and making more of a mess. Time to check the crankshaft and the cylinder. Now there are different ways to check the health of your bottom end. I'm using a real simple side to side and up and down motion to see if the crankshaft bearings feel good. They did, they felt tight, very little free play. I'm also looking for crosshairs that were evident in the cylinder, meaning that I felt confident enough to move on without having to hone or replate the cylinder. Now that said, I know the history of this bike and know that it had very little hours on it. If you're at all concerned about your crankshaft health or your cylinder, please have a professional take a look at it. Continuing on, you're just going to clean using air, cleaner spray, and towels, just making sure that the cylinder gets a nice thorough cleaning, replacing the gaskets on the top. Have some motor oil handy so that you can coat the inside of the cylinder as well as the piston ring in the next step. Now it's time to install your shiny new piston and really let your bike know that it's loved. I like to lay everything out, make sure that you're not missing anything before you move on. This is a quick glimpse of old versus new parts. Install the cylinder gasket. This is the piston ring. There is a marking with the letter T, as you'll see right here. That is the top of the piston ring. Very important that you keep the T on the top. Go ahead and apply a light coating of motor oil to the ring before you install it. Start with one side, put it in the groove, and then not bending it too much, but it does have a little expansion to get it up over the top of the piston. And then go ahead and align your piston ring with this little gap on the top of your piston. There's also indication marks on the very top of your piston. The arrow should be going towards the front of the bike, towards your exhaust. Coat the wrist pin bearing with motor oil as well as the wrist pin. Install that through with the arrow pointing towards the front of the bike. And then the circlip, insert one end, use a needle nose and just kind of compress it and tuck it down in there and then just finish pushing it in. Do notice that the gap in the circlip is opposing the gap in the piston. You don't want those two gaps to align. And repeat on the other side. Also double check to make sure that your paper towels are good. You do not want to drop a circlip down in the bottom end and learn the hard way. Time to install the cylinder. Remove the paper towels from the bottom end. Double check to make sure the piston ring gap is aligned with that alignment gap at the top of your piston, and then compress the piston ring with one hand and have the cylinder in the other, and just very small wiggles. Make sure that your dowel pins are in place. Mine never came out, and the cylinder should drop down onto the bottom end nice and smoothly. If you have any friction whatsoever right here, you really want to double check and make sure that you're aligning that ring correctly. Tighten down and torque the 4-cylinder bolts at 22 foot-pounds. Check your owner's manual for your bike. Connect your power valve. Make sure to put that little spacing collar back in there, connect your arm, and then replace the bolt with the washer. The torque on this is very light, just a few foot-pounds. By the way, go ahead and go online, Google your bike. You're gonna find some kind of online manual with torque specifications. This is what I've been referencing. And replace the power valve cover gasket. Make sure to seat the front of the cover gasket onto that existing rubber piece that's already on the motor. And replace your 3 bolts. Install the cylinder head. So I'm just giving it a final clean before I put it on, getting rid of the existing carbon and such that was on there from before. A little air to clean out all the holes. Install the cylinder head onto the cylinder. The new gaskets were already in place. Install new brush washers and go ahead and put on the bolts. Tighten these in a crisscross pattern. The torque on these is going to be 20 foot-pounds. And it is important, so make sure to reference your own owner's manual to make sure you're getting that right. Check the reeds and install the spark plug. This is not a necessary step of checking the reeds, but since we're so far into it, I figured it's a good time to just check the health of this. If you've ever had debris come through your air filter, which is not good, it can chip your reeds. So I always look at the corner and the edges, make sure they're legitimate, and these look great. So I just went ahead and popped those back in. New reeds can be an awesome upgrade for a 125 two-stroke, but we just wanted to keep this primarily stock and make it nice and fresh. There was already a new spark plug in this bike, so I'm just knocking a little bit of the carbon off with the wire brush, blowing it off, pop it back in. Thank you so much for watching episode number 4 of our YZ125 build giveaway. There's more videos on your right. Click to subscribe and enter the giveaway. We are super excited to give away this bike. See you in episode number 5.